We were told not to sit too aggressively in these chairs, so we'll see what happens.
Hello.
So excited to have you here. Really glad to hear more about your work. I'm a longtime fan, so I think this will be really fun.
Thank you, and thank you guys for all coming here.
Yeah. So earlier when we were chatting in the green room, I said I wanted to ask you how you got started with photography, and you said you've always been interested in photography. But that kind of made me wonder, why do you think photography has sort of sustained you as a creative practice for so long?
Photography has just been my way of like proving I exist, and I kind of wanted it to be a diary when I was younger for people to like look at my life and be like, oh, who is this guy? Like, he lived here. And like, kind of like in a Vivian Maier way, where like, we find these photos and it's like, he dated this person, or like, I don't know. Like, I just kind of wanted people to look back at my life and was like, he lives it.
Yeah.
And lived a full one.
Especially because you do a lot of self-portraiture, that makes sense, the sort of diaristic angle, I think.
In a way, self-portraits have been a journey, and I was a little shy at first with a self-portrait, but now I feel like I can kind of like own it. Yes.
Yeah, and I know a lot of your work also features people sort of in your own community, you know, your friends, your family. I imagine is that part of sort of that earlier experience with photography as well?
Yeah, with shooting my family, they were the first people that like I met, like mom, dad, grandma, like family, friends, and I was like, they were the most interesting people in my life, so I was like, why not shoot them? And I mean, things got a little aspirational when it was like, I want to shoot some people like Naomi, and crazy that twice. And
did she remember you?
Yes. Okay. She's a Gemini, and we kind of connected on that basis, and she's like so larger than life, but also like when you get to know her is so sweet, and I kind of feel like everyone that I shoot ends up becoming a part of my family.
That's very lovely. I was going to ask you, you know, like you've obviously photographed so many megastars, including, I was laughing at looking at your Instagram before this. I was like, ooh, Madam Web. Recently photographed.
Dakota Johnson is equally as funny, like in the memes that you see of her and in real life.
That's how she is in real life?
Yeah, I was shooting her and I was like, you know, I was like telling her, I was like, yo, my favorite thing to do is like shooting actors because like they really perform and like really emote in the face, and like sometimes with models they don't really have like the
more
ability
like dancers.
to. Yeah, well, like dancers are really in control of their body, but like with actors in particular, they like really know how to like embody a character in a really special way. And she was like, oh, it's just like I'm acting, like, and I was just like, oh, you really are exactly the same person, very like dry humor.
Yeah.
But my favorite type of white woman.
Do you have any other people who you feel like you're really connected with when you were photographing them?
I feel like everyone is very special, and they're all so different. Yeah. But like, I feel like I'm really good at playing 7 strangers at a table, and I feel like I do it with my friends a lot when we have dinner.
Yeah.
Feel like Billy and Ice Spice are very similar, and I just think about. I was hanging out with Billy recently. She had a Halloween party, and I was like, "Oh wait!" Like I was like kind of nervous, like because it was the first time I saw her in maybe like 2.5 years, and I was like, "Oh, I'm like, oh, you remember me? I'm invited to your Halloween party. Okay, cool." We like really made an impression on each other. She was like, "Bitch, I don't meet that many people." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, you wouldn't meet that many people being one of the most famous people on the planet."
That's like when I love when I find out a celebrity has like a normie, like a husband.
Yeah.
Like, where did you meet?
On like eHarmony.
There's somewhere for everyone.
Well, that's CBT, probably Hinge now.
Yeah, that's true. No, Raya.
Raya? Well, yes. Yeah. They're on Raya.
Yeah.
Trying to be normal.
Trying.
Yeah.
How do you do? I guess something that's really interesting to me about the scope of your work is the range of these very like massive things for, you know, Gucci, et cetera, these big editorial publications. How do you sort of balance the commercial success you're having with also maintaining the depth and integrity of your artistic vision? You know, when you're doing something, I imagine, especially with celebrities, like your stuff for WMAG's best performances, like you have so little time with these people. I imagine it's hard to kind of sometimes capture what you're looking for and, you know, maybe the time you have.
I kind of treat everyone the same. Like I'm just talking to you, where it's
Yeah.
just like, hey, like what's going on with you?
Yeah.
Like what's happening in your life? And I kind of just try to treat everybody as a person, because I think that like most celebrities don't get treated that way. They get treated like an animal in a cage, and like everyone's trying to get their little like 1-2 in with them. That's really it. I kind of like run away from my own like idea of fame too, where I'm like, I don't really know what y'all are talking about.
Well, I feel like that's a very East Coast approach to fame. I've always felt that's the difference between sort of East Coast and West Coast. It's like in New York, you run into a celebrity on the subway and you like pretend you don't know who they are. You leave
I don't know
them
if
room.
I pretend. I just kind of like.
That's how I do it. I gave Woody Harrelson directions on the subway recently, and he was like, "Where's the 6?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's that way."
I'm just like, nice shirt. Like, what's up? Like, like your hair. Like, what's going on? Tell me about your boyfriend. Like, I don't know, like just normal questions that you would ask any person. And I think that like kind of like humanizes the entire situation, and then we kind of forget that the camera is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting modes a little bit, this was mentioned in your intro, but I think you've talked a lot about young talent and fostering young talent, and how sort of new voices are often overlooked or pigeonholed in the industry.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that from you. How do you think young photographers are reshaping the industry, or what can established photographers learn from sort of this new wave of talent?
I thought about this question all day, because I was just like, Lord, this is it's a big question. My friend Amber Pinkerton is a photographer, and she's coming from like more of like London space, but I actually don't know where Amber lives, but like we kind of became friends online, and that's like how I made most of my friends. But she tweeted something really recently where she was like, my industry puberty is ending. And that really resonated with me, because like for anyone that's like not in photo or the fashion industry, like you have to like wait a long time or until like someone dies to like do the bigger shoots, the billboards, the photographers, the supers. And I was like, I've done these things before 25. So like, where do I fit into that equation of like industry puberty? And then I was like, this all feels like a little bit of a farce, and like something that like the industry wants you to like have to prove yourself. And I've always had issues with like authority. And so I kind of like, with my entire career, just kind of like skated through all of this. And when I think about like the idea of emerging, I think it's just like way to like one pigeonhole, but also I think it's like, if you're smart, you kind of look to what things are emerging, because I think that's where like the newest, ripest ideas are coming from. And then when I think about emerging, I think about like innovation, and I had like the tool of Instagram. And I think that like anybody that is coming from an emerging space is probably like doing this in a way that's going to be radical, it's going to be different, but also like you should definitely be paying attention. And I think that like, when you hear those words, maybe you should just tap in instead of like being like, this is new. Or like
people are afraid of new things. And I think also, speaking as a recently 30-year-old, I think people are afraid of their own irrelevance a little bit, and that's often what is behind a lot of the anxiety around younger talent.
I know, but I get really excited about aging and being older, because I think that one comes like wisdom and maturity, and I think in that wisdom and maturity that people that are older in this industry should like really like lean into that, because that's the thing that makes you special, versus like trying to be like the it thing. It's like, no, you are the legacy. And I think that like a lot of people that are in the space of having a legacy should be ushering new people in, and I think that's something I've always wanted to do.
I think that ageism also cuts both ways in terms of cutting out younger people and cutting out older photographers as well. And I like seeing that. I think I see it in your work as well, and just the way, even if it's just bringing older individuals into photography also, and people sort of from those different backgrounds, even who don't get represented in photographs as often, I think is also a part of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really alienate anyone from being in front of my lens. And I think that like with the projects I've been doing in the past year, it was really important for me to like democratize like the sitter, and also democratize like what it meant to like, because I was like, I don't want to, like, people were telling me like I was only shooting for things like Vanity Fair, I was only shooting for Calvin Klein, and that was really starting to annoy me, because like photography was something that was always really special, and it was like my thing. It wasn't something that was attached to like capitalism and commerce, and I was like, yeah, no, I need to like go back to like the roots of when it was just like me, my friends taking pictures and just having fun, because that was like the part that started to get so away from me, and I wanted to really, really tap back into that. And it's been fun.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to talk more about Philadelphia. Set open this fall in Lower East Side. How have you found the response to the show? And, what was the experience like?
Amazing. To do my first show is something that like I waited my entire life for, and to like have it be well received. The amount of press was like way more than I thought it would be. And then to like receive so much positivity when I was doing things that were sensitive, like when you talk about blackness, you talk about queerness, when you talk about sex, those are things people go, whoa. And I was going straight for it and being really live and direct. The penetration shot was the shot that like people were definitely talking about.
Yeah.
But it was like, I knew that the community that surrounded my work was going to come with like a higher brow thought, and also like with a queer thought too. And I knew that it was going to, like I've created a space for myself in photography, in art, that was going to be surrounded by nothing but love. So I was like, if there was any hate, it was going to be coming from people that were like bigots, and I don't really care about a bigot.
Who does? I think we were talking about that earlier as well in relation to things like Instagram and how around sort of like prudishness and what's probably nice, I would imagine, about a gallery space is that it sort of affords a different pathway away from the algorithm and away from these sort of like restrictive censorship around things like sexuality and queerness. Yeah.
I mean, with my first series, Glitter Boy, I experienced a lot of hate. I like did a video for like rack.com, maybe TBT to that. And it was like 2016 Instagram, and I'm never going to forget, it was like one of the most viral things that ever happened to me in my life. It got 500,000 views. But also I got probably like 1,000 comments calling me a faggot. And I was just like, I didn't really know how to process that at the time because I was 19. But I've accepted that like my work is going to be polarizing, and people are going to try to hate and just like also like throw shame at me. But in that, I was like also receiving a lot of love, and a lot of people telling me that they were being seen by the things that I was doing. And I was like, well, that's the people that I want to make this for. And I was like, with Philadelphia, I want to go even further, because there's so much shame that surrounds blackness, and there's so much shame that surrounds queerness, that I just kind of wanted to make a space again that was just like loving, because you don't really get to see black boys, especially black queer boys, be surrounded by love.
Yeah, and I saw that you described the show as like a manifesto of radical queerness and black queerness, and I thought that was such a nice word in that context, in the media.
Yes. I've been on a personal journey of just like self-acceptance. This started as something that was just for me. Then at 19, it became something that was for everyone else. And then this, me really just being now 26, I had to reach a point where it had to be again for me, but then I was also aware of all of you. And in that, I was like, okay, how do I do something that's completely personal and vulnerable when I have all these people looking at me, and also like a lot of people are looking up to me, to again be vulnerable. And I was like, oh, that's so fucking scary. But in that, I was like, there's a lot of power. And I was also seeing a scarcity of vulnerability in photography. There was a lot of images that were being made just for the simple fact of like beauty, or like just because you knew this image would sell. And I was like, with my first show, I was like, I got to show that I have big balls. And I remember speaking to my PR team, and I was like, well, I'm not a pussy. And I was going to like have conversations that people would be so afraid to have within a photograph.
Yeah.
And it was like things that I saw photographers like and I saw photographers like Mapplethorpe that like they were addressing like head on in their imagery. Like sexuality was like something that like Mapplethorpe was fisting.
Yeah.
Was like unafraid to show that she endured trauma and like lived pain. And I was like, I wanted to make images that made you feel something real. Because I was like, I don't know a moment in my life that I wasn't thinking about pain, shame. And then also like, I feel like with being black and queer, there's a moment of resilience that like, I'm going to be this black radical fag in front of all of you and not give a fuck. And I think that like in that, it allowed me to like, one, grow up, and then two, be just like unabashed in like who I am.
Yeah, I really love what you said about sort of like how do you do something that's both personal and universal. And I think it's a quote from Diane Arbus, the photographer, who I also really like, who she said, in the universal in the specific lies the universal. And I think there's something really wonderful. And I definitely see that, I think, with both your, Philadelphia and extended work.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. With the show, it's like, I don't know, I'm always aware, but at the same time, I'm like, I try to like turn a blind eye when I'm making, because I was like, I know that, like, I don't like to poke the bear a bit, because I knew that there was going to be a white audience that was going to come into my show and be like, oh, well, this is just like sex. But then I like was like, I know there's the black queer audience that are going to see the nuance and see the layers of everything that surrounds like me, one, doing this as like a black queer artist, and then two, the nuances of everything that I was like showing with those photographs.
I was also curious, in addition to Philadelphia, you were part of the New Black Vanguard at Saatchi.
Yes.
In 2022, which, was celebrating sort of a new age of Black photography and Black photographers working in fashion, especially.
Yeah. Shout out to that, though.
Yeah, yeah. And
3 years.
I would love to, just that is such a 3 years, 2 years, I don't know, it's like a long time in some ways. Like, do you feel like that, sort of the current landscape of representation in the art and fashion world for Black photography has shifted in that time? And if so, how?
I think my generation of image makers changed everything with photography, where you got to see, one, blackness take center stage, but you got to see body positivity, you got to see like, because I feel like for a long time it was really saturated with like white male photography, and it was just like, I was like getting a little bored. But shout out to like everyone that's in the New Black Vanguard, because I feel like we definitely shook this industry up, and that show definitely allowed all of us to come through. And all of my peers, always feel like the little engine that could next to those guys, because they're like somewhat 3 to 4 years older than me, and I just watched them achieve so much, and at the same time while I was like making my career, and I think that like the part that's really interesting for like me in particular is that I have to like edit in real time, like as I'm making this thing in front of you guys, but with when it comes to like what we did